Hey everybody,
What's up?
it's Sophie and Marco dish out on the movies.
And Bernie.
That's our white cat. His name is Bernie after Bernie Sanders. Alright, well, I talked about in other little videos we did that February is relationship month. And I don't mean just the romantic kind, but any kind of relationship. And that we would review movies that composed or comprised of relationships. So today we're reviewing Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, a black and white movie that premiered in 1948. It starred Bud Abbott as Chick Young and Lou Costello as Wilbur Gray. Then Glenn Strange as Frankenstein, Lon Chaney as Larry Talbot / Wolfman.
Lon Chaney Jr., you mean?
Okay.
Ooh.
Yeah, because his dad was also a horror actor. As Larry Talbot / Wolfman, Bela Lugosi as Dracula / Dr. Lejos, Lenore Aubert as Dr. Sandra Mornay, Jane Randolph as Joan Raymond, an undercover insurance investigator, Frank Ferguson as Mr. McDougal, owner of the House of Horrors, and Charles Bradstreet as Professor Stevens. At the end of the review, I'll talk a little about him. Pretending to be Mr. McDougal, owner of the House of Horrors, Larry Talbot / Wolfman calls an express shipping office where Chick and Wilbur work. Wilbur answers the phone and Wolfman tells him that 2 huge crates were shipped there and not to allow them to leave the building. However, Larry couldn't get that part in because the moon came out and he turned into Wolfman. Comedy ensues because Wilbur thinks Larry put his dog on the phone. The real Mr. McDougal comes to the office and wants his crates. They're humongous, and as Bud stands on top of them, they topple over. He's okay, and they are still intact, so Mr. McDougal wants them to deliver the crates to the House of Horrors. The next scene is McDougal's House of Horrors, a dark place filled with frightening wax figures. In the first crate is a coffin with Dracula's logo on it. Chick and Wilbur don't seem impressed by that at all. Then Chick goes outside to get the other crate. While he's outside, Dracula keeps peeking out of his coffin. There's a lot of back and forth with this. After Chick brings the other crate in and he and Wilbur aren't looking, Frankenstein is awakened by Dracula's ring, and he and Dracula eventually leave the building. When Mr. McDougal arrives, he's really mad, of course, and has them arrested. Joan Raymond bails them out and appears later at the express shipping office. She acts very interested in Wilbur, which causes Chick to wonder what is going on and why aren't any women interested in him. The fact of the matter is, Joan is an insurance investigator working undercover to investigate Mr. McDougal's insurance claim after Dracula and Frankenstein go missing. Sandra, a beautiful woman who has been hanging around Wilbur at the express office, comes by to remind him about a party that they are supposed to go to. And Joan wants to go too. So they're going to pick her up and they will all go to the castle where Sandra lives and works to get her. Meanwhile, Larry Talbot arrives in town, and there's a huge comedy bit between him and Wilbur. When Wilbur, Chick, and Bud go to Sandra's castle, they meet Dr. Stevens, Sandra's assistant. The main story, which is really loose and full of plot holes, is that Sandra likes Wilbur because she wants his brain for Frankenstein's body.
Ah, spoiler alert.
Well, it's really not that big of a spoiler. So go ahead and talk about the movie. Is there anything you want to say about it?
Well,
I pretty much said the movie. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff
a
that
lot
goes
of
on,
people overrate this movie
but- yeah, well, I was probably one of them.
because they think about it. I think it's because they see it once and they're just so impressed with, like, oh, there's Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Wolfman together that they don't really pay attention to the movie that much. Basically, they're fanboying out over it.
Yeah.
And I used to watch it quite a bit. I watched it like a couple of times, but it isn't as great as everyone makes it out to be,
No.
because it's not as funny as other ones that they've made. And the pacing isn't as good either because it feels really disjointed.
Yes, it does.
It feels like, hey, we have to spend 20 minutes at the McDougal's House of Horrors, but then we only spend like 5 minutes at the hotel room. We
Where-
go spend 1 minute over here, we go spend 1 minute over there.
Wolfman was at the
And-
hotel room, just for everybody.
And that's just not a very good, it's just not very entertaining.
Well, it just isn't very meaningful.
Yeah.
And I agree. I really thought I liked this movie, and I was wrong.
Yeah, before this she was like, oh my god, this is the best movie ever! Oh, they've never made anything as good as this!
Well, they have. I just haven't seen a lot of their movies.
They haven't. I've always said either Lost in Alaska or The Invisible Man one is my favorite so far. And I just showed her Lost in Alaska for her birthday, and she loved it and thought it was like a million times better
It
than
was.
Meet Frankenstein.
Probably better to review that. But it's we picked the Frankenstein one because it has all the monsters in it. We like to review horror quotes or scary movies, and so I mean this wasn't scary at all. It's supposed to be funny. You know, Abbott and Costello are a comedy team. There is a lot of comedy in it, and it's fun to see the monsters and Abbott and Costello together. And I think Wolfman was the scariest of the bunch.
He was scary because he was taking it seriously,
You know, the other
and he
monsters weren't.
looked really good. Like
He did.
that Wolfman makeup looked as good as it did in the first movie, or even maybe better. And the Dracula makeup, he looked kind of like a clown,
It looked terrible.
and then
Frankenstein looked
Frankenstein looked okay.
good. He's just funny. He's goofy. The only thing he said in the movie was "Master." He was talking about Dracula because Dracula woke him up, so therefore Dracula was his master.
Which I actually think that's a missed opportunity, because we saw in Bride of Frankenstein that he was able to start talking somewhat. And I know that in later movies they did some weird things, like in Ghost of Frankenstein they like switched his brain or something like that. I don't know. I can't remember. I haven't seen Ghost of Frankenstein. I've only seen Son of Frankenstein once, but in Bride of Frankenstein, he learned how to talk, and I think it would have been cool if he was able to talk. I also think it would have been cool for the whole movie to just take place in
The Wax Museum.
the Wax Museum.
Instead of going, they were there at the express office. They were at the costume party at the end, and then the castle, and what am I missing? Oh, the hotel room.
I like the costume party quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think it's a perfect type of setting to have like people in costumes and then the Wolfman around and Dracula around.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. There was a funny part with that because Chick dresses up exactly like Larry Talbot, and he has a Wolfman mask.
Yeah.
And the real Wolfman attacked Mr. McDougal, who happened to be at that party too. I don't know why. And when he saw Chick and with that outfit and then carrying that mask, he thought he had attacked him. So he started chasing him. So that was funny because it's like this was kind of blew my mind. Chick and Wilbur didn't really seem that I don't know, it was like they weren't impressed with it's like I don't understand where was the self-awareness, like doesn't he know he was dressed as Wolfman? I mean, he's dressed up like Larry Talbot, like he doesn't know Larry Talbot's Wolfman, but he's dressed up exactly like him. I don't know, it's really weird. So I thought the movie was also disjointed. In fact, I told Marco, he didn't know about this, but when I grew up, there was this toy called Color Forms, and it was these little pieces of plastic that you put on a scene, and they're little figures and other pieces, and you just set up a story. It's like a storyboard. And I felt like this movie was somebody got the characters and they were like color forms, and they put them up on a board, and then they took them off and changed them around and put another few up on the board, and that's how disjointed it was. But there were some funny parts. I agree, but it's just it wasn't as good as I thought, so it was disappointing to me. I guess I wanted to say this. I don't think there's much to say about the movie anymore, except I just wanted to say at the very, 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 very end, Vincent Price's voice shows up at the end as the Invisible Man. And I asked Marco if Vincent Price played the Invisible Man, and he didn't. So I don't know why they decided to get Vincent Price, but I guess they were trying to like throw everybody into the pot to get the most.
Except for Boris Karloff, who's in Meet the Killers instead.
Yeah. And then I wanted to say Charles Bradstreet plays Professor Stevens. And I don't think anybody is going to know who that is. But I just thought it was interesting to bring him up because he was supposed to play Sanders' assistant. And they show him in the castle. He's down in the basement, and he's working on notes and looking at a microscope, I think, or whatever. He doesn't really. He goes with Joan Raymond. He goes with them to the costume party, and he kind of takes over, and he's with her. And I just wanted to say that he's known mainly for this role in the movie, which I don't really think the role was needed at all.
Yeah, he was literally just a helper, a background guy.
Yeah, his appearance made absolutely no difference to the story. But I wanted to say that once he was offered the chance to play Tarzan, which back in the day, the Tarzan movies were very popular, and he was offered the chance to play Tarzan. He turned it down. And then he also turned down the lead in TV's Gunsmoke, which was also a popular TV show. So I don't think he was that interested in acting. I just thought that'd be interesting to note. But I gave this movie a piece of my last year's birthday cake. It was pretty to look at, but didn't taste that good. it was disappointing to think that I really liked this movie before, and then after watching it again, it wasn't so good. So I'm very sad. Very sad.
Okay, so as I was trying to say, think the whole movie should have taken place in the Wax Museum because everybody really remembers the Wax Museum stuff and they don't really care about anything else.
Well, they didn't show, in this movie, they didn't even show much of the museum. They basically showed Dracula peeking out of his coffin, and then they show Frankenstein. They uncover the crate, and then they show Dracula sneaking up. I don't know what happened. What Dracula hypnotized Wilbur, and then I don't know where Chick went. And while that was going on, he got his ring, and you know how Frankenstein has bolts in his neck. He got the ring and he touched it to each bolt, and I think to each eye, and that woke him up. That's weird. It hasn't been in anything else I've ever seen, but whatever.
Okay, so as I was trying to say, the Wax Museum is what everybody remembers, and is really the funniest part of the movie. And
Yeah.
I think it was a huge missed opportunity that they just spent a couple of minutes there. And because when I used to watch it, I would really like just watch the beginning and then watch that part and then forget about everything else and just like fall asleep through the rest of the movie. And what was I going to say? Oh yeah, the opening credits were actually really cool too. The opening credits were where they displayed each character and they're all marching like in a stormy night and it's all black and white and cartoony, and I thought that was really well designed and I love that a lot. And I also think that really the female characters in this movie were the worst because they were kind of useless. I mean, they didn't do anything with them. They were just kind of there.
Well, they announced them like they were going to have some big deal, like Sandra wants Wilbur's brain so she can do surgery on him and give the brain to Frankenstein, but then that kind of just fell apart. And then Joan, the blonde, she shows up, bails them out of jail, and she is an undercover insurance investigator investigating this claim that Mr. McDougal made when Frankenstein of Dracula disappeared. And then that kind of just fizzles away. So it's kind of like, that's too bad.
It's too bad, but I feel like they just had them there because they were pretty, and that's all they were there for. And it's unfortunate. I think that Dracula, like he was kind of like in the background too, and that was kind of disappointing. And so all in all, I would give this movie a ice cream soda. So you start off with club soda, and then you put in a scoop of, get ready for this, pistachio ice cream for the Frankenstein monster.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you put in chocolate syrup, and you put in just a little too little, not enough chocolate syrup. And that's what this movie makes me think. There's not enough chocolate syrup, and there's all this pistachio ice cream. It's kind of a weird combination together, and it's just it's okay to look at. It looks kind of cool. It doesn't taste that good.
Yeah, that was just like my last year's birthday cake. It looked really good. really delicious. But then when you cut it up, it tasted terrible.
Yeah.
And it probably cost a lot of money too, because it was one of those fancy birthday cakes.
And I can attest to that because you go to the shop and the cakes they're all they look like a rich person would buy them, and but then you cut it open, it's like, ugh.
You buy it for the appearance, but not for the taste, which
Yeah.
makes no sense. Because I would think you'd want it to look good, but then because it would mean that it would taste good, but that wasn't the case.
Speaking of all the Meet the Monster movies, I think that Meet Frankenstein has the best technical feat, I guess, or the best victory by having Bela Lugosi, Glenn Strange, Lon Chaney Jr., and Vincent Price together. Although not very well done together. And then I think Meet the Invisible Man is the best story. And that's why I think that one is the best one out of them all. And then, of course, we also have Meet Dr. Jekyll. And that was... And that's the funniest.
Well, maybe next year we can do a week of Abbott and Costello. Or in October, we could do a week of Abbott and Costello's, quote, scary movies. Although I doubt that they're very scary. Because they're a comedic pair. And so, really, you expect comedy.
Yeah. So, all in all, let's talk about the relationship.
Well, the relationship is between Abbott and Costello, and they work well together, and they have a lot of chemistry, and they know each other very well, and I don't know, what can you say about them?
Well, I think they have a really good relationship in this movie. And that they were actually working really well together. They seemed really fresh together. And not like in some of the later movies like Meet the Mummy. Oh, speaking of which, I forgot all about that one. That one's the boring one. and that one, it's kind of like, oh yeah, we're old. We've been doing this for a while. We're just doing something fun. We're getting a paycheck. That's all we're doing.
In other words, it's a get a paycheck movie.
Well, I wouldn't be that
sarcastic.
Yeah, I wouldn't be
Simple.
that. I wouldn't be that simple about it. It just seemed like that they were kind of done with their career, and it's like, yeah, let's do Meet the Mummy and everything. And so, and also, Sandra and Lou, I that is one part of the movie I loved, was the fact that Lou had both actresses at, quote, as his love interests, fake love interests.
Yeah.
And then Abbott was standing around and he's like, what? Like, this doesn't make any sense. When am I going to get somebody?
Yeah, why are all these girls interested in him?
Yeah.
Nobody shows any speck of interest in me.
That was hilarious.
Yeah.
But I think something else they could have done at the beginning was show Sandra looking around for dumb men and picking out different men and like trying to see if they're bad enough, and then stumbling upon Lou and he's really dopey, and I think it would have been really funny.
Yeah, because we don't know how Sandra found that particular office. Well, I guess she knew about the crates because of Dracula, but I guess that's it. She came to that office because of the crates, and then she gets interested in Wilbur because she's looking for a brain for Frankenstein. But what was the deal with that? She wanted to do surgery Why? Because Dracula wanted her to do it, or
Yeah, there's no motivation for her to do it,
yeah.
especially at first, and then Dracula has to hypnotize her to do it at that moment because they thought it would be too dangerous. Which, spoiler alert, it was, and they lost. And so she had no motivation. It did seem like they were trying to make her either Dracula's accomplice or an obsessed Frankenstein fan. But I didn't see enough of that kind of evidence to really think about that. And that's another problem I had with this movie is Dracula didn't have any other goal besides get a servant with no brain.
Yeah,
And
why?
And why?
Why does he need a servant anyway?
Why does he need a servant? He can just hypnotize people. What's his end goal? They didn't explain that at all. They just kind of
Yeah, I
said
think we're talking about a movie that would have too much thinking involved, and I think
it wouldn't take that much thinking for
I know.
him to just say, "Oh, I need a servant so that I can be guarded on my way back to my old castle and live there forever
yeah,
and
I guess.
take care of me." Like that. It's simple. It's simple. That doesn't take thinking.
Well, I think that the focus is on the comedy, and then the story was secondary or something.
Well, I'll give you a movie where there's both. Okay, American Pie. And the whole movie, there's a story, and the story's a pretty good story. It's a really good story for a high school movie. And at the same time, they take little moments out of the story, and they make them really, really funny. But they focus on the story first, and I think that's where this movie faltered, and that's where Meet Invisible Man exceeds expectations. So, it's an ice cream soda.
It's a bad birthday cake.
Yeah. And in the next few days, we will be reviewing Heather's.
Yeah.
She'll be giving it some horrible, nasty, mean review, and I'm gonna give it the exact opposite. So
I won't give it a horrible, nasty, mean review, but
yeah, you will.
I was not.
Just be honest.
I was not excited about watching it, but I watched the whole thing, and so it's another relationship movie, and I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it has Winona Ryder in it. I'll just say that. We'll talk about it later. So I think we're done for now.
And you were really shocked when you watched it, and that didn't help anything.
I was shocked because it wasn't what I thought it was.
She thought it was going to be a comedy, and I did too when I first watched it, and it turned into something else.
Which I don't exactly know what.
Yeah.
Satire.
So, goodbye for now.
Bye for now.